Hey, welcome to The Explainer. So today we are going to tackle a really fascinating historical and honestly theological mystery. It all kicks off with a book in the New Testament, but it's going to take us way back. Back to the very dawn of nations. It's a story about a name, a people, and a message that spans thousands of years.
Okay, let's just dive right in. We're asking what seems like a simple question. Who were the Hebrews? And you might think the answer is, Abraham, maybe Moses. Nope. To get to the real truth, we have to solve this puzzle by tracing an identity all the way back through time to its single, kind of surprising origin.
All right, so here's the plan for our little journey. We're going to start with the strange anonymous book that gives this people its name in the New Testament. Then we'll travel back to find an ancient identity, meet the one person who started it all, and then we're going to bring it all back to understand the book's message, not just for them, but for us today.
So first up, our investigation really begins with one of the most unusual books in the entire New Testament. The book of Hebrews is a bit of an enigma, and figuring out what makes it so weird is actually the first big clue we need to follow.
Okay, check this out. It's like we're looking at a case file here. First off, the author, anonymous. We have no idea who wrote it. It isn't addressed to a specific church, like the letters to Rome or Corinth. And get this, the language. It speaks of our fathers, and it just assumes its audience has this expert-level, inside-and-out understanding of the entire Levitical system. This book was clearly written for a very, very specific group of people. All right, on to our next clue, and you'll see how this starts to build. To understand the audience, we have to understand their identity. And here's the key. The term Hebrew is way, way older than most people think. It actually predates the entire nation of Israel itself.
And this is absolutely critical to get our heads around. Hebrew is an identity. It's based on lineage, a bloodline. Israelite, on the other hand, well, that refers to a member of the covenant nation that was established much, much later with Jacob, whose name you'll remember was changed to Israel. So Hebrews existed before Israel was ever even a thing.
This verse from Genesis, this right here, is the smoking gun. The very first time Abraham gets a label in the Bible, long before he's the father of a nation, what's he called? Abram the Hebrew. This tells us his identity was already a known thing. So that just begs the question, right? Where did that identity come from?
So if Abraham was a Hebrew, who was he descended from? Well, this question takes us even further back to a single man who lived during one of the most pivotal moments in all of ancient history, the scattering of the nations.
So this timeline shows us the direct line from Noah's son, Shem, all the way down to Abraham. Now think about this for a second. The entire world, according to Genesis, comes from Noah's 3 sons. But while all these other nations were starting to pop up from Ham and Japheth, the Bible zooms in on this one specific line from Shem. And right there in the middle, it highlights one man, Eber. And he lived during the exact generation of the Tower of Babel. That's the moment humanity was fractured and dispersed. This is the thread God chose to preserve.
And this, my friends, is the big reveal, the aha moment. The name Eber literally means across or to cross over. The word Hebrew, Ivri, comes directly from his name. So the Hebrews were, quite literally, the descendants of Eber. They were the people who came from the other side of that great scattering of nations at Babel, a people who crossed over that historical chaos with their identity totally intact.
So you've got to be asking why? Why do it this way? Why preserve this one specific identity for generations in, relative silence? The answer, it turns out, reveals something really profound about how God works. He first secures a unique identity before he reveals his covenant. He sets a people apart long before he ever makes a formal promise to them.
So layer 1, we have the foundational identity, the Hebrew. This is the bloodline, the descendants of Eber, a people preserved while all the other nations were being scattered.
Then, on top of that, layer 2, the covenant nation of Israel. This was formed generations later through the specific promises God made to Abraham and his kids and grandkids. So, identity first, then covenant. And finally, the third layer, Judaism. This is the religious and cultural expression that developed over centuries, all centered around the law given to Moses and the temple worship system. Keeping these 3 ideas, identity, covenant nation, and religious expression, separate in our minds is the real key to solving this whole mystery.
All right, so we've done our historical detective work. We've got all our clues in place. Now let's snap right back to that mysterious book that started this whole thing. Because now we can see with honestly stunning clarity exactly who the book of Hebrews was written for and why its message was so incredibly urgent.
The audience was laser-focused Hebrew believers, people who knew their identity, their covenant, and their religious system like the back of their hand. Imagine this. They were facing intense persecution for their faith in Jesus, and they were feeling this immense pressure to just go back, back to the familiar, tangible system of temple sacrifices.
So what does this book do? Its argument is just relentless. It's so powerful. It essentially says to them, look at your entire history, every ritual, every hero, every single promise. Everything you are so tempted to run back to has already been fulfilled and totally surpassed in the person of Jesus Christ.
And you see, this is why the audience is so important. This argument would completely fall flat on a Gentile convert from Rome. They wouldn't feel that pull to go back to Levitical worship. But a Hebrew? Oh, they would. The author just systematically takes every single pillar of their identity, angels, Moses, the priesthood, the sacrifices, and shows how Christ is superior to every single one.
Okay, so that brings us to the big question for you and me, right? If this letter was so specifically tailored to first-century Hebrew believers, what are we supposed to take away from it as modern readers, coming from all sorts of different backgrounds?
And this right here, this might be one of the most important things to understand about reading the whole Bible, not just this book. The book of Hebrews was not written to us. We are not the original intended audience, but it was absolutely 100% written for us, for our instruction, for our encouragement, and for our understanding of God's huge, overarching plan.
So what's in it for us? Well, a ton, actually. It teaches us these profound truths about God's faithfulness, that He finishes what He starts, that Christ is the reality that all those Old Testament shadows were pointing to. It calls us to a faith that keeps going, even through hardship, just like the heroes in its famous Hall of Faith. And it totally reframes suffering, not as punishment, but as the loving discipline of a father.
Wow, so we've gone from this mysterious letter all the way back to the Tower of Babel and back again. So what's the one big idea that we should walk away with after all of that?
It's this. This is the powerful final thought. The preservation of the Hebrew line, from Eber through all those centuries of chaos and turmoil, it's a living picture of a divine principle. What God starts, He faithfully finishes. The story of the Hebrews is a reminder that God never loses a people He begins to preserve. The real question for us then is, can we trust that same preserving power in our own lives today?